Millionaire switched his pregnant wife's baby at birth. The mistress's reaction was shocking. Power and wealth can inspire extraordinary ambition, but they can also spawn unthinkable betrayal. In this dramatic tale, a self-made millionaire commits a shocking act, switching his pregnant wife's baby at birth to hide a disturbing secret. Under the veneer of luxury and success lies a life teetering on the edge, propelled by a desperate mistress and a ruthless hunger for control. As hidden truths bubble to the surface, they ignite a chain reaction that leaves innocent lives in turmoil. Love, loyalty, and destiny collide in a frenzy of heartbreak, deception, and, ultimately, karmic payback. Prepare to be riveted by this unforgettable saga. Alexander Caldwell had been charming people from a very young age, smooth in conversation, dazzling with his wit, and relentless in pursuit of success. He'd grown up in a modest family in upstate New York, where his father was an office clerk and his mother a schoolteacher. From the very moment he understood what it meant to want more in life, Alexander knew he would strive for greatness. Whether it was skipping meals to save up for a new suit in high school or pulling all-nighters in the local library to get better grades, there was an intensity within him that outmatched anyone else around. Hard work became his armor, determination his blade. By the time he was 30, Alexander Caldwell had transformed from a scrappy small-town dreamer into a formidable millionaire. He had an uncanny ability to gauge market trends, buying undervalued startups and nurturing them into profitable ventures. His name was whispered in the corridors of renowned financial institutions, and his business partners came to respect him as a visionary. Confident, wealthy, and devastatingly handsome, Alexander was accustomed to bending circumstances to his will. Along the way, he met Evelyn Marsh, who was everything he wasn't: sweet-tempered, empathetic, and thoroughly uninterested in the cutthroat world of corporate intrigue. She worked as a graphic designer for a small advertising agency and cared more about her local animal shelter's charity drive than about the complexities of stock markets and mergers. Alexander was drawn to her like a moth to a gentle flame. She represented a grounded warmth he often missed in the high-stakes realm of big business. Her beauty wasn't glamorous in the typical sense, but it radiated from her heart outward. She had long, auburn hair that curled softly at the edges and expressive hazel eyes that regarded each person with a warm curiosity. She laughed easily, often, and with such purity that it left Alexander breathless. Despite initial disbelief among her friends that a quiet, artistic woman could be with such a high-powered businessman, Evelyn and Alexander found joy in each other's company. For a while, it seemed like a match written in the stars. Months flew by like seconds. Alexander proposed, and Evelyn, with tears of genuine happiness, accepted. The wedding was a grand affair at the historical Plaza Hotel in New York City. The guest list was lavish, an eclectic mix of startup founders, wealthy patrons, and Evelyn's close-knit group of artist friends. Despite the extravagance, the most memorable moment for everyone was the look on Alexander's face when he saw Evelyn walk down the aisle in a fitted lace gown. He seemed genuinely awestruck, tears welling in his eyes for the first time in years. To the outside world, it was a fairy tale wedding. But the vows that spoke of unwavering devotion were overshadowed in Alexander's heart by a greed that never fully extinguished. Even in his happiest moments, a lurking voice in his mind whispered, "Is this all? Could there be more? Not just more money or power, but a different kind of excitement, a different kind of thrill." That gap in his soul created a crack in the foundation of the marriage, a crack that, while not immediately visible, would eventually grow into a chasm. Evelyn had no clue that Alexander's roving eye would test the boundaries of their bond. Though her husband spent long hours at Caldwell Industries, his growing business empire, She didn't suspect anything beyond the typical sacrifices demanded by a competitive career. She awaited his rare nights off, greeting him with tender smiles and lovingly prepared dinners. Her unwavering support and genuine innocence made him feel appreciated, though he quickly realized that he thrived on more than just a stable relationship. And so, in the second year of their marriage, a venomous seed sprouted in Alexander's life, a mistress named Vanessa Rivers. She was hired as a marketing consultant at Caldwell Industries, a recommendation by Alexander's CFO, who praised her tenacity and charisma. Tall, raven-haired, and polished, Vanessa was both fiercely ambitious and magnetic in her presence. She wore her confidence like a second skin, striding through the corporate hallways in impeccable tailored suits. When she first caught Alexander's eye, she returned his lingering look with a coy smile. A silent invitation flickered in her dark eyes. Vanessa recognized an opportunity when she saw one. She knew Alexander was married, but the allure of wealth, power, and the possibility to climb social and professional ladders was too great. She fed Alexander's ego with well-timed compliments, always ready with the right words to stoke his ambition. Their professional interactions morphed from business lunches into late-night dinners in private clubs. Before long, dinner conversations turned into stolen kisses in the backseat of limousines, and eventually, nights in penthouse suites. At first, Alexander was skilled at keeping his secret life away from Evelyn. He offered the perfect excuses meetings with overseas clients, urgent conferences in different cities. He showered his wife with gifts and replaced his presents with expensive tokens, wrongly assuming it would fill the emotional void. But Evelyn, who had grown up with the understanding that love meant dedication, never suspected he was lying. Her only discomfort was that she began to sense his detachment, a coldness in his demeanor when he was home. She rationalized it as stress. After all, he bore immense responsibilities. She promised herself she would support him and wait for him to find balance again. However, a big surprise was lurking around the corner. Evelyn discovered she was pregnant. That day, she had visited Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore for a scheduled art therapy workshop she was conducting for pediatric patients. A routine checkup at the hospital's clinic turned into stunning news. She was carrying a child. Overjoyed, she couldn't wait to tell Alexander, believing a baby would bring them closer, bridging whatever gap had formed between them. When she broke the news during a rare dinner date, tears of happiness glistened in her eyes. Alexander, busy checking his phone for business notifications, seemed momentarily stunned. He plastered on an excited smile, an act he had perfected in his dealings with clients, and reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Evelyn took that gesture as genuine enthusiasm, but inside, Alexander's mind was churning. A child wasn't part of his current plan. He was already juggling the guilt of an affair, plus an empire that demanded constant attention. A baby with Evelyn would complicate his carefully maintained double life. Yet, on the surface, he played the doting father-to-be, accompanying her to prenatal appointments when his schedule allowed, and assuring her he would be there every step of the way. His real focus, however, was on a covert idea that was forming a monstrous plan that he scarcely believed himself capable of conceiving. As months passed, Vanessa Rivers was none too happy about the idea of Alexander having a child with Evelyn. She knew that it would inevitably claim Alexander's devotion, overshadowing the hold she had on him. She had worked tirelessly to insert herself into every corner of his life, learning his business strategies, studying his preferences, even managing to secure a financial commitment for her own budding startup from him. The baby threatened all of it. One late night, in the dimly lit lounge of an exclusive country club, Vanessa confronted him, swirling a glass of champagne in her manicured hand. "What are you going to do about it?" she demanded, her voice low and urgent. "You know a baby changes things. Evelyn is going to want more of your time. And if you start playing house with her—" Alexander cut her off with a deep sigh. "I know," he said, eyes flicking over the hushed crowd. "We need to be careful about how we proceed. I can't risk losing everything I've built just because you and Evelyn are in conflict." Vanessa's gaze sharpened. "I've sacrificed a lot for you, Alexander. I've turned down other men, lost opportunities, and focused on you. If you think I'm going to stand by and let you become Mr. Family, man, you're mistaken." The conversation ended with tension unresolved, leaving Alexander to dwell on an idea he had been toying with in the shadows of his mind. Though he told himself it was insane, he rationalized that money could buy anything, even the cooperation of certain medical professionals. If he had the power to control the situation, why not use it? He was not a man who waited for life to happen to him. He made life happen for himself. He kept the plan close to his chest. Initially, he needed to ensure the outcome served him best, whether or not Vanessa would remain with him in the long run. He made phone calls to individuals with questionable ethics, scouting for any lead that could help him manipulate hospital records or staff. His vantage was that the baby's identity, Evelyn's baby, could be swapped with another infant if the right amount of money exchanged hands. The notion was monstrous, but Alexander had always believed that the ends justified the means. As the due date for Evelyn's baby drew nearer, the gravity of his plan sank deeper into reality. Never once did Evelyn suspect the darkness swirling beneath the surface of Alexander's supportive facade. She spent her days designing a whimsical nursery, painting pastel animals on the walls, all the while believing her husband was away on pressing business matters. In her mind, everything was set for the arrival of their child, which she believed would anchor their future in love and stability. Vanessa, for her part, began to sense Alexander was hiding something from her as well. He was meticulous about the details he shared, and she caught fragments of hushed phone calls, references to large sums of money being transferred. A tiny part of her suspected it involved controlling or even ending Evelyn's pregnancy, maybe a payoff to keep the mother somewhere far away. But she never imagined something as brazen and horrifying as swapping babies at birth. In truth, Vanessa had her own secrets. Despite her ambition and her attempts to cling to Alexander's wealth, she was not as financially secure as she pretended. Her extravagant wardrobe and luxury lifestyle were built on credit cards and the occasional gifts from older suitors she'd known before Alexander. She also had an ailing mother in another state, quietly draining her resources. The pressure to marry Alexander, or at least secure a more permanent position in his life, weighed heavily on Vanessa's shoulders. If she couldn't do that, she risked slipping back into the precarious financial state she'd emerged from. As the tension escalated, Vanessa grew increasingly resentful of Evelyn. She fantasized about a future in which she was the one bearing Alexander's child, thus cementing her importance in his world. She loathed how Evelyn, with her unassuming warmth, managed to occupy that sacred space. The more Vanessa dwelled on it, the more she willed some grand shift in circumstance that would place her in a position of power over Evelyn. The final month of Evelyn's pregnancy arrived. Every day she battled waves of fatigue and backaches, but her spirit remained buoyed by the excitement of imminent motherhood. She would sit by the nursery, humming lullabies she remembered from her childhood, her hands on her swollen belly. She recorded notes for a future scrapbook, notes that read like private letters to the unborn child, promising a life filled with love and creativity. Meanwhile, Alexander's business soared to new heights, ironically in tandem with the moral lows he was about to hit. Caldwell Industries inked a lucrative deal with a major tech conglomerate, bringing in millions. The media hailed Alexander Caldwell as a genius entrepreneur. His social media pages were filled with congratulatory messages and philanthropic accolades, including a recent donation he had made to fund new classrooms in underprivileged neighborhoods. Outsiders admired him as a man with a heart of gold, never suspecting the monstrous act he was orchestrating. A week before the baby's due date, Alexander slipped into a private meeting with Dr. Lionel Rivers, no relation to Vanessa, though the coincidence in surnames never escaped Alexander's sense of irony. Dr. Rivers was a respected obstetrician at the very hospital where Evelyn planned to give birth, Johns Hopkins Hospital. For the right price, Dr. Rivers agreed to certain manipulations of documentation and oversight in the delivery room. The plan was laid out in chilling detail. Alexander would be alerted as soon as Evelyn went into labor. Dr. Rivers would discreetly switch the newborn with another infant, whose birth mother had signed away her parental rights under dire financial circumstances. Alexander would fund that mother's departure to another state, ensuring no loose ends. But that was only half the story. The mistress, Vanessa, had no idea that the baby Alexander intended to install as Evelyn's was, in fact, Vanessa's own secret child, a child she had conceived earlier in her life but had kept hidden, claiming a miscarriage to the father. Alexander, upon discovering Vanessa's darkest secret through private investigators, recognized the twisted opportunity. The other mother, the one with dire financial circumstances, was none other than Vanessa, though disguised under a different name in the hospital records. She was desperate to keep this child a secret from the world, having carried it to full term away from prying eyes, hoping to secure a lavish hush fund from Alexander in exchange for her silence. For Vanessa, the plan was different in her head. She believed Alexander would use the swapped baby to blackmail Evelyn or keep Evelyn's real child away from her. She never dreamed the baby that would land in Evelyn's arms would be Vanessa's own. The layers of betrayal were becoming almost too convoluted to track a labyrinth of secrets only Alexander controlled. At 2:00 a.m., the call came. Evelyn's water had broken. She had gone into labor while working on a last-minute design for a charity event. Rushed to Johns Hopkins Hospital, she was admitted to a private suite. Groggy from contraction pains, she clutched Alexander's hand in relief when he arrived. He kissed her forehead, whispering, "You're doing great, my love. We're in this together." In those hushed hours of pain and anticipation, Evelyn clung to him, tears of both joy and fear streaming down her face. She had faith that this moment, the birth of their child, would cement their bond. The medical staff moved around them with professional precision, hooking her up to monitors, checking vital signs, administering an epidural. A nurse assured her the baby was healthy, that everything looked normal. But behind closed doors, Dr. Rivers was carrying out a macabre script. He messaged Alexander with the update, "All is prepared." The next part of the night unfolded in a blur for Evelyn, who was hardly aware of her surroundings as labor intensified. Sometime around 3:30 a.m., her son came into the world, wailing and pink. Evelyn's tears of relief flowed freely. She reached out, hoping to cradle the baby, to press him against her chest and feel that first treasured moment of mother-child bond. But Dr. Rivers, glancing over her sweaty, exhausted face, insisted on whisking the infant away for a quick check-up. Moments later, an unsettling hush settled over the room. Evelyn was fatigued, drifting in and out of consciousness. She only vaguely remembered Alexander stepping out with the doctor. She never saw the swap take place, her real son, whom she had carried for 9 months, being exchanged for Vanessa's infant, just born a short while earlier in a different part of the hospital. When Dr. Rivers returned, the baby in his arms looked so similar newborns can be almost indistinguishable to inexperienced eyes, yet it was. In fact, a different child. He placed the swapped infant in Evelyn's arms, praising her stamina and telling her that her baby was perfectly fine, healthy as could be. Sobbing in relief, Evelyn kissed his forehead, naming him Liam, the name she and Alexander had chosen. She never noticed the flicker of guilt in Alexander's eyes as he stood close by, pretending to share in her joy. In another wing of the hospital, Evelyn's true son lay unclaimed. Rivers had placed him in the care of a nurse who believed she was simply looking after an infant awaiting transfer. Paperwork shuffled, records tampered with. Alexander had written checks, large enough to keep silence from those who needed silencing. And within hours, an unsuspecting adoptive family, arranged by Vanessa's shell of an identity, would be ready to take that child away. Vanessa, for her part, was in a private suite as well, though under a false name. She had gone into labor that very night, the result of a short-lived affair from months before she met Alexander. She planned to give the baby up for adoption, forging an agreement that would net her a generous payoff. Little did she know, Alexander's plan for that child was far more nefarious. Through an elaborate set of instructions, he ensured Vanessa was heavily sedated after childbirth, so she wouldn't fully comprehend the immediate aftermath. Her child was gone before she could even hold him. The official narrative was that the adoptive parents took custody immediately after birth, which she'd agreed to. Thinking she'd be free of the burden, Vanessa signed the final paperwork in a haze, believing she'd never see or hear about that infant again. 2 days later, well after the drug-induced fog cleared, she demanded answers from the on-duty nurse. "I want to know if the child is in good hands," Vanessa said tersely. "Don't I have a right to confirm the adoptive parents' information?" She had second thoughts, her maternal instincts flaring too late, or perhaps it was guilt. But the staff, under strict orders, provided minimal information. All she got was a vague reassurance that everything proceeded smoothly and that the adoptive family had left with the baby. When Vanessa finally confronted Alexander, calling him from a hospital corridor to demand clarity, he brushed her off with carefully chosen words. "Vanessa, you signed the adoption agreement. There's nothing more to discuss," he said, as though bored. Then he hung up. He was at Evelyn's side, doting on his wife and the baby boy she now believed was her own. Vanessa never suspected that the same child she had carried was in Evelyn's arms, not halfway across the country with strangers. In those first days, Evelyn was in a blissful daze of motherhood. She texted friends pictures of Liam, posted a modest announcement online, and told her parents how much he resembled her father around the eyes. Nobody questioned the infant's lineage. To them, he looked like a perfect blend of Evelyn and Alexander. Alexander, however, was a bundle of restless energy. The magnitude of what he'd done kept him up at night, but not necessarily out of remorse, more out of fear of being discovered. He rationalized his act by telling himself that this was best for his future. He believed that once the dust settled, he would have a life free of the complications that his real child might have brought. Yet a gnawing disquiet ate at him whenever he gazed upon the child. He wondered if he might grow to hate the child, or if some cosmic karma would land upon him. He also wondered how Vanessa would react if she ever uncovered the actual fate of her baby. Weeks turned into months. Evelyn and Alexander adjusted to the new routines of caring for a newborn. Sleep-deprived but elated, Evelyn lived for every coo, every tiny smile, every milestone. Alexander feigned paternal pride, playing his part in a manner that occasionally even convinced himself he was the father of that child. Yet beneath his polished exterior, cracks emerged. Guilt can corrode even the most iron-willed individual, and in Alexander's case, it manifested in nightmares and a heightened sense of paranoia. He began to snap at Evelyn over trivialities, especially when she would gush about how Liam was definitely taking after his father. He found himself drinking more, staying out late under the pretense of business dinners. Sometimes he'd wake in a cold sweat, certain he'd heard a baby crying in a dream, only to realize it was the memory of the real child's cries echoing in his mind from that fateful night in the hospital. Vanessa, too, felt something amiss. Although she'd told herself she wanted nothing to do with her biological child, a relentless curiosity plagued her. She noticed oddities in Alexander's behavior, how he seemed oddly distant whenever she brought up the subject of the adoption or even children in general. She discovered small hints in the hospital billing statements that didn't align with what she'd been told. While rummaging through some of Alexander's paperwork in his home office late one evening, under the guise of helping with administrative tasks, she found references to a large cash transfer to a doctor, Lionel Rivers. A prickle of dread coursed through her. Why would Alexander pay her obstetrician such a large sum of money? Something dark, something monstrous lurked at the edges of her reasoning. Though she couldn't piece it all together yet, she sensed that if she dug deeper, she might unearth a horrifying conspiracy. Given her own cunning nature, Vanessa wasn't going to rest until she found the answers. Her suspicions grew stronger when she saw pictures of Evelyn's baby for the first time at a corporate gala. Evelyn attended briefly with Alexander, proudly showing off baby Liam to well-wishers. Dressed in an adorable knitted sweater, the infant had wide, curious eyes and a shock of dark hair that could have belonged to any newborn, but something about those eyes tugged at Vanessa's maternal gut. She felt an odd jolt of recognition she couldn't explain. Fear and anger swirled inside her, but she needed irrefutable proof before confronting Alexander. Determined to ferret out the truth, Vanessa started by bribing a low-level employee in the hospital's administrative department for access to birth records on the night both she and Evelyn delivered. The employee hesitated but caved when offered a sum that eclipsed their monthly salary. Through that connection, Vanessa acquired partial documents indicating that Evelyn's baby was recorded as male infant, 7 lbs 4 Oz, with a notation about the baby going for an extended observation. Vanessa also found records of another baby, male infant, 6 lbs 15 Oz, delivered around the same time, whose mother's name was blacked out due to private adoption. Something in the sequence of events and times didn't add up. She noted Dr. Rivers's presence in both cases. She recalled his cameo in her own labor, which was strange because, officially, she had been assigned a different obstetrician. The more she uncovered, the more certain she became that Alexander had orchestrated some monstrous swap. Her suspicions were confirmed one evening when she decided to stake out Dr. Rivers's residence. She cornered him as he arrived home, stepping out of his sleek European sedan. It was a perilous move, but Vanessa was at her wit's end. "You're going to tell me the truth," Vanessa hissed, stepping out from the shadows of the porch, "or I'll have every reporter in this city on your doorstep by morning, Doctor." Rivers, sweaty and visibly startled, attempted to deny everything, but Vanessa pressed him with scraps of information she had gleaned, including the bribe. Alexander had paid him. Faced with the possibility of losing his medical license and going to prison, Dr. Rivers broke. His voice quivered as he confessed, "It was a baby swap. Alexander wanted your child with Evelyn. He had me switch them right after birth, while both mothers were vulnerable." Vanessa's world lurched. She had to brace herself against the porch railing to keep from collapsing. "What are you saying? Are you telling me that Evelyn is raising my baby right now?" she asked, her voice trembling with rage and disbelief. Dr. Rivers nodded mutely, tears of shame welling in his eyes. "I never thought it would go this far." He said it was to protect everyone. A primal scream tore from Vanessa's throat. She turned and fled into the darkness, numb with fury, heartbreak, and a hunger for revenge. In the following days, she devised a plan of her own. She wanted her baby back, but more than that, she wanted to bring Alexander's world crashing down. Vanessa leveraged her cunning and her access to the corridors of Caldwell Industries. She found a private law firm, one notorious for handling scandalous paternity suits. She showed them the evidence and threatened to go public if they didn't help her reclaim custody. It became a game of cat and mouse, Vanessa ensuring the lawyers were well compensated, and the lawyers salivating at the chance to bring a high-profile scandal to the courts. Yet, they all knew a direct assault might backfire if Alexander managed to cover his tracks, or, worse, countersue. A thorough approach was needed. At the same time, Vanessa toyed with the idea of going straight to Evelyn. She wondered how a gentle soul like Evelyn would react if she discovered she'd been loving and nurturing someone else's baby while her own was lost to her. But Vanessa also felt pangs of jealousy. Part of her wanted to spare Evelyn more pain, especially because she recognized that Evelyn was an unwitting victim. Another part, though, wanted Evelyn to feel the same agony and betrayal. Emotions warred within Vanessa's mind until she decided Evelyn should at least know the truth. The real problem was that no one, including Vanessa, knew where Evelyn's true biological child had ended up. According to Dr. Rivers, Alexander had arranged for the baby to be handed off to a private adoption service. That child could be anywhere, possibly in a different state or even a different country. This was the part that Vanessa couldn't abide. Her own baby was safe, ironically cared for by Evelyn, but Evelyn's actual baby was lost in the system. As the days passed, an uncanny set of events began to wear down Alexander's carefully built empire. A rumor about fraudulent business practices at Caldwell Industries bubbled up in the local financial press. The share price started slipping, and Alexander faced heated board meetings. At the same time, the CFO, his original confidant in hiring Vanessa, resigned abruptly under suspicious circumstances. Anonymous letters accusing Alexander of unethical conduct reached the desks of major journalists. Then, in a more direct blow, an investor lawsuit threatened to freeze Caldwell Industries' assets. While none of these events were overtly tied to the baby swap, a sense of unstoppable doom settled over Alexander. It was as though fate, or karma, had begun its retribution. Alexander, frantic, tried to hold everything together. He spent less and less time at home, leaving Evelyn to care for baby Liam almost exclusively. Their once lovely home now felt stark and empty. Evelyn noticed Alexander's tension but believed it to be related to business. She tried to comfort him, but he pulled away. Now she found herself alone on most nights, singing lullabies to her son, confiding in him the sadness she felt. Evelyn's discovery of Alexander's treachery began with an innocuous hint. She was flipping through receipts to finalize their household budget, a habit she'd kept from her modest upbringing, when she discovered an invoice from a private investigation firm. It was dated just weeks before Liam's birth and referenced Target via Rivers. Overcome with curiosity, Evelyn quietly searched online to see if the firm specialized in corporate investigations or personal matters. What she found was a direct link to a PI known for resolving parentage disputes. Anxiety knotted in her stomach. Why would Alexander hire a PI to investigate a woman named V.R. Rivers? She recognized the last name Vanessa Rivers, the marketing consultant from Caldwell Industries, who was rumored to have a close working relationship with her husband. Evelyn's mind raced, drawing possible conclusions she tried not to believe. Trembling, she combed through more paperwork in Alexander's study, discovering the suspiciously large payment to Dr. Lionel Rivers. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form in her mind. It was something about Vanessa, about a child, about secret medical transactions. Unwilling to let her imagination spiral, she decided to confront Alexander directly that night. When he came home, reeking of expensive whiskey, Evelyn stood in the living room, baby Liam sleeping in a cradle nearby. She confronted him calmly at first, asking about the pie invoice. He tried to brush it off, but Evelyn stood her ground, demanding a full explanation. His attempts to dismiss her as paranoid only fueled her desperation. In a moment of panic, Alexander realized that if he continued to stonewall her, she might dig deeper. He calculated that the best course of action was to spin a half-truth. "Evelyn," he said softly, reaching for her hands, "I hired the investigator because Vanessa was blackmailing me. She claimed to have damaging information about my business and the baby. She said if I didn't pay, she'd spread rumors that Liam wasn't my child. I couldn't let that tarnish our family's name." At the mention of blackmail and Liam, Evelyn's heart rate surged. "What do you mean?" she claimed. "Liam isn't your child. That's impossible, he's ours." Alexander sighed, feigning the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Vanessa's insane," he said. "She came up with some story that her baby was swapped with ours. She said the hospital records could be forged. It's all nonsense. I didn't want to worry you, so I paid for a pie to shut down her lies." Evelyn was reeling. The story sounded too wild to be true, but her intuition screamed that Alexander was holding something back. She decided to act as though she believed him, hugging him and whispering assurances that she trusted his intentions. But inside, she resolved to verify the truth on her own. Over the next week, Evelyn made discreet inquiries at Johns Hopkins Hospital. She spoke with nurses who'd been on duty the night. Liam was born. One of them, an older woman near retirement, let slip that Dr. Rivers had insisted on personally handling Liam's checkups right after birth, a break from standard hospital protocol. Another nurse admitted she had been asked to recheck baby identification bands, something she found odd but didn't question at the time. These anomalies haunted Evelyn's every waking moment. She recalled glimpsing Vanessa at a corporate gathering a few weeks back, noticing how the woman had stared at Liam with an unsettling mixture of longing and despair. Could it be possible that Vanessa's allegations were real, not just a blackmail scheme? In a moment of moral fortitude, Evelyn decided to take a DNA test. She collected a saliva sample from herself and baby Liam, then mailed it to a reputable lab in a neighboring state, hoping to avoid any tampering. The results would either assuage her fears or confirm her darkest suspicions. Every day felt like an eternity as she waited. It was during this waiting period that Vanessa, through her lawyers, reached out to Evelyn directly. In a confidential letter, Vanessa wrote, "Evelyn, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I have undeniable proof that the baby you hold is biologically mine. If you want answers, come to the Fulton Hotel on Oak Street, Suite 1202, alone." Evelyn's hands shook as she held the letter, reading and reading the words. A part of her was terrified of meeting Vanessa, worried that everything she cherished might be ripped away. Another part knew she needed clarity, whatever the price. On the appointed day, she made an excuse about visiting a friend and slipped out of the house, heart thudding. She arrived at the Fulton Hotel, took the elevator to the 12th floor, and nervously knocked on the door. Vanessa answered, still the picture of cool elegance, but her eyes betrayed anguish. She invited Evelyn in and locked the door behind her. What followed was a torrential confession. Vanessa explained her own pregnancy, her plan to give the baby up for adoption, and the bizarre revelation from Dr. Rivers that Alexander had orchestrated a switch. She presented partial hospital records, dated receipts, and a written confession from Dr. Rivers secured under legal pressure. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming. As Vanessa recounted every harrowing detail, tears streamed down Evelyn's face. Each puzzle piece clicked into place: the hush money, the forged paperwork, and Alexander's unwavering denial. The evidence left no doubt. The boy she had nurtured for months was not her biological child. Her baby, her real flesh and blood, was out there, a missing part of her heart. By the time Vanessa finished, Evelyn was shaking uncontrollably. She had never experienced such a profound betrayal. To think Alexander, the man she trusted with her life, had stripped her of the chance to raise her own child. Furious devastation surged through her. "Where is my baby now?" she asked in a trembling voice. Vanessa's face fell. "I don't know. Alexander arranged a private adoption. Dr. Rivers said he might be in another state by now." The cold silence followed, punctuated by Evelyn's muffled sobs. Evelyn left the hotel in a daze. The world felt surreal, as if she were an observer in someone else's tragedy. She returned to the house and found Alexander in his study, pacing. He turned to her, about to speak, but she cut him off with a single question: "Why did you do it?" The color drained from his face. He tried to stammer out a denial, but she unleashed all the information Vanessa had shared. Like a cornered animal, Alexander lashed out, yelling that he had no choice, that it was necessary to protect our future. His twisted reasoning poured out, though the words made little sense to Evelyn. She felt physically ill. Their argument escalated. She demanded the location of her real child. He offered vague excuses and half-hearted reassurances that he could fix it. Stricken by grief, Evelyn told him to stay away from her and baby Liam, threatening to involve the police if he refused to tell the truth. She left him standing in the living room, mouth agape, as she stormed upstairs to pack a suitcase for herself and the child she believed now belonged to Vanessa. In a heart-wrenching scene, Evelyn softly told the infant she had named, "Liam, I love you so much, baby, but I have to do what's right." She called Vanessa, explaining that she was prepared to relinquish him if the DNA test confirmed the parentage. However, Vanessa, equally shaken, insisted that they fight together to find Evelyn's real son before making any final decisions about custody. It was a moral stand that neither woman had expected to take, but a shared maternal instinct compelled them to do what was right for both children. Teaming up, albeit warily, Evelyn and Vanessa launched a desperate search for the child who had been whisked away. They hired a team of investigators more reputable than the one Alexander had used and pored over adoption agency records, forging legal motions to unseal any closed adoption files pertaining to that fateful night. The process was maddeningly slow, burdened by bureaucratic red tape and privacy laws designed to protect adoptive parents and birth mothers. During this time, the DNA test results arrived in a sealed envelope. Evelyn hardly needed the lab's verdict to confirm what she already knew, but seeing it in black and white shattered her anew. The baby she had called Liam was a 99.9% match to Vanessa Rivers and 0% match to her. She clutched the results, sobbing uncontrollably in Vanessa's presence. For a moment, the two women set aside their differences, locked in shared sorrow over Alexander's manipulations. To complicate matters, Vanessa found herself struggling with unexpected maternal feelings. Initially, she'd wanted to give up her baby, but seeing photos of the little boy smiling, hearing about his milestones from Evelyn, and witnessing Evelyn's own heartbreak changed something in Vanessa. She no longer saw him as an unwanted burden. She realized she wanted to hold her baby, to make amends for even considering giving him up. It was a complicated emotional terrain, and she had no roadmap. Meanwhile, Evelyn yearned desperately for her own flesh and blood. In a bittersweet twist, both women had come to love the child they did not birth. Alexander spiraled into crisis. His business faced multiple lawsuits, sparked by internal whistleblowers who exposed questionable accounting practices. His CFO's abrupt resignation turned into a liability When the CFO testified to regulators that Alexander had falsified reports to secure inflated valuations, investors sued, the board threatened to oust him, and the media smelled blood. Articles mocking the fall of the once proud Caldwell Industries circulated widely. In his personal life, everything unraveled. Evelyn had left him, refusing to see him except through her attorney. She filed for legal separation, citing irreconcilable differences. Despite the hush money paid to Dr. Rivers, rumors of a baby swap scandal began to swirl, especially after Vanessa's lawyers reached out to certain tabloids. Alexander found himself hounded by paparazzi who shouted invasive questions at him whenever he ventured from his penthouse. In a final attempt to salvage his business, Alexander tried to file for bankruptcy protection, hoping to shield certain assets. But legal entanglements complicated the process, leaving him teetering on the edge of financial ruin. The vast fortune he once flaunted was eroding at a shocking pace, consumed by legal fees, settlement costs, and plummeting share values. Despite his dire straits, Alexander clung to the hope that he could still manipulate the outcome of the baby scandal. He threatened to countersue Vanessa for defamation, claiming she willingly gave up the child. He tried to pressure Evelyn into keeping quiet for the sake of their public image, but the world had turned against him. No amount of money could restore what he had lost: his family's trust, his business empire, and soon, perhaps, his freedom if criminal charges were filed. After weeks of exhaustive searching, Evelyn and Vanessa's investigative team finally located a lead. A private adoption agency in Pennsylvania disclosed that a baby boy had been handed over by a third-party guardian matching Dr. Rivers's description. The baby was then placed with a married couple named the Hendersons, who had relocated to Connecticut. Evelyn's heart hammered in her chest. She contacted the Hendersons through the agency, initially met with resistance. The Hendersons were protective, fearing a scam or a custody battle. But once Evelyn and Vanessa supplied legal documents proving the baby had been illegally taken from Evelyn, the Hendersons agreed to a meeting, though they insisted on a cautious, mediated environment to protect themselves and the baby they had come to love. The meeting was set for a bright afternoon in a law office in downtown Hartford. Evelyn's stomach churned with nerves as she entered the waiting room, Vanessa by her side. The Hendersons arrived soon after, a baby boy in their arms, around 6 months old by now. The moment Evelyn saw him, her world shifted. She recognized him in a way that transcended physical features, a deep, primal bond. Tears sprang to her eyes as she approached the child, who gazed up at her with innocent curiosity. Mrs. Henderson explained that they had struggled to conceive for years and had resorted to private adoption. They had no idea the process had been tainted with deceit. While they felt enormous sympathy for Evelyn, they also loved the child deeply after nurturing him for months. The situation was heart-wrenching for both sides. No one wanted to break a family, yet the child had a right to be with his biological mother, if that was her wish. Legal negotiations stretched on for days. Ultimately, a compassionate judge recognized the gravity of the wrongdoing that had separated Evelyn from her child. He ordered a transition period, allowing Evelyn to bond with her baby gradually while respecting the Hendersons' emotional ties. A visitation schedule was set, with the possibility of full custody returning to Evelyn if all went smoothly. In a bittersweet arrangement, the Hendersons received acknowledgement for their role and were allowed to maintain limited contact if they wished, to avoid traumatizing the child with a sudden, total separation. Vanessa, standing by during the proceedings, felt a strange sense of relief and sorrow. She saw the joy in Evelyn's face, reflecting the wonder of reconnecting with her own son. It made her question every choice that had led her here. As for baby Liam, the boy that Evelyn had raised since birth, Vanessa arranged a legal process to establish her own custody. She, too, sought a gradual transition to avoid upending Liam's life overnight. By the time the dust settled, Vanessa had done something unexpected. She apologized to Evelyn. "I never wanted this," she said softly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "But I was selfish. I wanted Alexander's attention. I didn't realize how far he would go, how far I would let him go." Evelyn stared at her for a moment, then offered a tentative embrace. The two women, once rivals, had been bonded by the trauma inflicted on them by Alexander. They each bore scars from his manipulations, and though they might never be close friends, they shared a deep understanding of the pain he had caused. In a dramatic twist, Vanessa's attorneys decided to press charges against Alexander on behalf of her child, citing conspiracy, fraud, and child endangerment. Evelyn also joined the lawsuit, demanding justice for the anguish of her baby's abduction. The case turned into a media firestorm. The revelations of the baby swap overshadowed the corporate scandals, painting Alexander Caldwell as a man devoid of moral constraints. People were appalled that someone so privileged would commit such a heinous act simply to maintain control over his personal and financial life. The trial took months, but the outcome was inevitable. Alexander was found guilty of multiple counts, including conspiracy and falsification of medical records. Dr. Rivers, who cooperated with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence, testified in chilling detail about the night of the swap. Vanessa confirmed his testimony, producing receipts and recorded phone calls. Evelyn tearfully recounted her experiences, describing how her life had been torn apart. In a final moment of karmic justice, the judge handed down a lengthy prison sentence, declaring Alexander a danger to societal and familial norms. The press had a field day, splashing headlines like "From Millionaire to Monster, the horrifying baby swap saga." His reputation was destroyed, his fortune decimated by legal fees and civil settlements. In the end, no one mourned the fall of Alexander Caldwell. He became a cautionary tale, a man who tried to bend fate to his will, only to be crushed beneath the weight of his own malice. In the months and years that followed, Evelyn rebuilt her life with her rightful son, whom she named Lucas. The transition was challenging. He had bonded with the Hendersons, and it took time for him to adjust to a new environment. But with love, patience, and therapy, the two formed a profound connection. Evelyn's parents also embraced their long-lost grandson, showering him with affection in an attempt to make up for lost time. As for baby Liam, Vanessa embarked on a path of responsible motherhood, something she never imagined for herself. She found a modest apartment near her mother's nursing facility, balancing her time between caring for Liam and building a career consulting for smaller companies. While she could no longer rely on Alexander's fortunes, she discovered a strange sense of fulfillment in forging her own path, free from the manipulative entanglements of the past. Evelyn and Vanessa maintained a cautious yet respectful relationship. They met occasionally so that the two boys, so entwined by the circumstances of their births, could know each other. It was a bittersweet arrangement, marking a new beginning forged from a shared tragedy. Over time, they developed a mutual empathy, two mothers who had faced the unimaginable and lived to tell the tale. Dr. Rivers lost his medical license and served a reduced sentence, after which he moved out of state, seeking anonymity. The Hendersons, having grieved the loss of Lucas, adopted a baby girl through a fully transparent process. They stayed in touch with Evelyn, exchanging photographs and letters, ensuring that Lucas had some sense of connection to the family that once cared for him. Karma had indeed struck Alexander Caldwell with ruthless precision. In prison, he was just another inmate, deprived of the luxuries he once took for granted. Letters from lawyers and creditors piled up, each one demanding money or detailing another lawsuit. He spent hours in the prison library, trying to research appeals that went nowhere. When he wasn't fending off threats from other inmates, he was haunted by nightmares of crying babies in a dark hospital corridor, their wails echoing, accusing him of robbing them of their rightful lives. The few times he tried to contact Evelyn or Vanessa, his calls went unanswered. With no allies left, no fortune to bail him out, Alexander was left to face the consequences of his actions in the most isolating place imaginable. In the end, he had no one to blame but himself. Outside those prison walls, life continued forward, shaped by both heartbreak and hope. Evelyn, once the dutiful wife, emerged stronger and more confident. She found success launching her own design studio, using her creativity to support her child and fund charitable causes. Vanessa, once the cunning mistress, softened into a more caring woman, discovering the reward of genuine responsibility and real love for her son. And so the millionaire who switched his pregnant wife's baby at birth discovered too late that money could not protect him from moral decay. The shocking reaction of the mistress, once a catalyst for his secret life, only accelerated his downfall. In the end, fate and karma spared no mercy. Bonds shattered, reputations imploded, and yet, out of the wreckage, a new kind of strength and solidarity emerged for those who had been wronged. Conclusion, approximately 150 words. Thank you for watching this harrowing tale of twisted deceit and ultimate retribution. We've witnessed how one man's greed and betrayal unraveled not only his fortune, but also the very foundations of his relationships. We've seen a wife robbed of her child, a mistress manipulated into heartbreak, and two innocent babies caught in a terrible lie. Yet, amid the darkness, remarkable courage and resilience shone through. The mothers joined forces, reclaimed what was stolen, and forged a future shaped by truth rather than deceit. Their journey teaches us that no matter how deep the betrayal, justice and karma find a way to restore balance. Millionaire promised the world to his mistress but forgot his pregnant wife's birthday. Meet Alexander Van Doren, a self-made millionaire, so used to getting everything he wants that he's forgotten how much it costs others. His life is a tapestry of luxurious galas, glittering diamonds, and secret rendezvous. But beneath the polished veneer, he's about to discover that a man who can buy the world might lose what truly matters most. Driven by obsession, he dares to promise the world to his radiant mistress, all while ignoring the quiet heartbreak of his pregnant wife. When a forgotten birthday sets off a chain of cataclysmic events, Alexander's world careens toward disaster. Secrets will unravel, loyalties will shatter, and no amount of money can save him now. Alexander Van Doren was, by all appearances, the perfect portrait of success. He was lean, tall, and strikingly handsome, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to pierce through whoever stood before him. His family name carried weight, but his true fortune was self-made, a sprawling real estate empire built upon a single risky investment he'd made at just 24 years old. By 30, he had multiplied that fortune 100-fold. Now, at 36, he was poised to double it yet again. He lived in the affluent enclave of Westbridge Hills, where gated mansions lined the streets like jewels in a crown. Neighbors spoke his name in hushed tones, a mix of envy and admiration. He had everything he wanted, or so it seemed. The truth was, in the silent corners of his life, dissatisfaction brewed like a storm. Alexander craved excitement, an addiction to adrenaline, and the thrill of conquering every obstacle. His wife, Catherine Van Doren, was the epitome of dignity and grace. Once an aspiring poet, she had traded her ambitions for the life of a corporate wife, attending charity events and nodding dutifully, by her husband's side. Despite her own silent yearnings, Catherine held steadfastly to love and loyalty. She was 9 months pregnant with their first child, her belly a gentle curve that symbolized a long, cherished dream, but the glow that once marked her features had dimmed in recent months, replaced by worry lines carved from loneliness and suspicion. The tension in the mansion was palpable. Lately, Alexander had seemed preoccupied, spending many nights in his study or at business meetings. Catherine had begun to wonder, had she done something wrong? Was the pregnancy too much for him? Or perhaps there was someone else occupying that space in his heart. She tried to dismiss the thought, but women's intuition rarely lies dormant for long. Then came an innocent hint of reality that Catherine couldn't ignore. One night, while searching for her car keys, she found a receipt for an extremely expensive bracelet in Alexander's jacket pocket. Engraved on it was a message that read, "For my shining star, A.V." Now, Catherine's name had no V in it, and though the initials matched her husband, the note looked suspiciously intimate. Panic churned inside her, but she told herself it could be for business, perhaps a thank you gift for an investor or something along those lines. Yet the seed of doubt took root. In the days that followed, Catherine became more observant. She noticed Alexander's phone lighting up late at night with texts from someone named AP. She noticed the hush in his voice whenever he answered these calls. She felt the distance, colder than any winter frost, growing between them. But still, she tried to hope, to believe that once the baby arrived, everything would fall back into place. Little did she know that delicate facade of normalcy was on the brink of shattering, sending the Van Doren household into turmoil from which it might never recover. Anastasia Pierce was Alexander's secret, a secret that roared like a wildfire beneath the surface of his otherwise controlled existence. She was a striking woman with raven hair and emerald green eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischievous curiosity. In many ways, she was the polar opposite of Catherine, yet she carried a certain allure that Alexander found irresistible. They'd met 6 months ago at a fundraising gala for the Westbridge Hills Arts Council, a place Alexander had attended more out of obligation than genuine interest. Yet upon spotting Anastasia across the room, her laughter echoing, her slender figure accentuated by a simple but elegant black dress, he'd felt a spark he could not ignore. Their first encounter was innocent enough. She'd merely introduced herself, praising his charitable contributions to local youth art programs. One drink led to another, and conversation flowed like a well-aged wine. Soon they were meeting under hushed arrangements at an upscale lounge downtown, away from the prying eyes of Westbridge Hills. They told themselves it was just a harmless flirtation, but lines blurred quickly. Anastasia was no naive college girl enamored by wealth. She was a sophisticated woman who had carved a path in the art world, curating exhibitions and traveling extensively. She was used to attention and men with money. Yet something about Alexander tugged at her heartstrings more intensely than she'd anticipated. Perhaps it was the subtle vulnerability lurking behind his confident exterior, or maybe it was his magnetic aura of possibility. He made lavish promises, whispered in her ear about a future filled with travel, romance, and a place of her own in his heart. She believed, or at least wanted to believe, that these promises were real. But as the months unfolded, Anastasia found herself catching glimpses of Alexander's deeper complexities, his restlessness, his unspoken burdens, and the ring that still glinted on his left hand whenever he forgot to take it off in her presence. She often wondered about Catherine, but Alexander's dismissals were always the same. "It's complicated. She doesn't understand me like you do," or "we're practically living separate lives now." He insisted a divorce was on the horizon, painting an image of a marriage that was more a business arrangement than a union of hearts. Stolen weekends in Montauk, secret lunches in hidden bistros, midnight phone calls brimming with passion. It was easy for Anastasia to lose herself in the fantasy. She craved the adrenaline too, thriving on the illicit thrill, but deep down, she yearned for stability. She wanted to be more than just a hidden mistress. She believed Alexander when he promised that soon it would just be the two of them. Now, with Catherine's pregnancy nearing its final weeks, the pressure mounted. Alexander was starting to show signs of agitation. He was jumpy, glancing at his phone every few minutes, always on alert. Anastasia felt the simmer of urgency in their conversations, as if a storm was about to break, yet she held fast to the illusions he'd spun around her. After all, he was Alexander Van Doren, the brilliant millionaire who had never failed in any venture. If anyone could make impossible dreams come true, it had to be him. What she didn't know was that behind the bravado, Alexander was dancing on thin ice, and every step threatened to plunge them all into the freezing darkness beneath. Back at the Van Doren mansion, the tension thickened with every passing day. Catherine's due date edged closer, and with it came a surge of emotional fragility. She found herself fending off swirling anxieties about motherhood, about her marriage, and about the unspeakable secret she feared might be unfolding before her very eyes. She tried to confront Alexander at dinner one night, choosing her words carefully, desperate for reassurance. "Alex," she began softly, tracing the rim of her glass of water, "I feel like we're drifting. Is something on your mind?" He looked up from his phone, seemingly startled. "What makes you say that?" "I've just been busy at work. You know how it is," he replied, offering the faintest of smiles. His eyes, however, revealed no warmth. Catherine pressed on, uncertain if she should mention the bracelet receipt or the mysterious late-night texts. But she stopped short, her heart hammered, fearing that speaking the words aloud would make them irrevocably real. She settled instead for a whispered question. "Don't you think we should spend more time together before the baby arrives? Maybe a short trip, just us?" Alexander grimaced slightly. The very thought of stepping away from his swirling entanglements, business deals, his affair, seemed like a burden. "We'll have time," he said tersely, returning his attention to his phone as if the conversation had already ended. That night, Catherine wept silently in bed while Alexander dozed off in his office, lulled by spreadsheets and clandestine messages from Anastasia. The future that once promised warmth and familial bliss was turning cold. If only Catherine had known how complicated things were behind the scenes. Days later, an ominous cloud settled over Westbridge Hills, literally and figuratively. A slow-moving storm churned in the Atlantic, threatening to drench the coastline in torrential rain. The local news couldn't stop warning about flash floods and hurricane-force winds. Yet the warnings did little to shift the course of the emotional storm taking shape within the Van Doren circle. For while Catherine was preparing for a baby, Anastasia was preparing to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. She'd grown restless with Alexander's excuses. Why did he refuse to make their relationship public? Why did he keep delaying the big talk about leaving Catherine? The frustration swelled into resentment, and resentment gave birth to bold decisions. Late one evening, she texted Alexander, "Anastasia, we need to talk, face to face. I want answers." But answers were not something Alexander was prepared to give just yet. His business deals were teetering on critical negotiations. A lucrative land development near Charleston was about to net him tens of millions. He needed to maintain focus, to keep his composure. He responded curtly, "Alexander, soon, my star, I promise. Just need to wrap up a few things." Anastasia read the message and felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, hope, anger, longing. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being strung along. Perhaps it was time to make Alexander see that she wasn't a mere accessory. Maybe she should make a bold appearance at the Van Doren mansion or confront him at his office. But would that risk losing him entirely? Fear and determination wrestled in her mind. Meanwhile, Catherine found herself alone in the mansion more often. She tried to distract herself by tidying the nursery, a serene space painted in soft green, with a crib made from the finest wood. But emptiness lingered in every corner of that grand house. She quietly decided that if Alexander wouldn't share his burdens with her, she'd uncover the truth on her own. Little did any of them realize that the approaching literal storm was merely a harbinger of the chaos and heartbreak that awaited. Catherine's birthday arrived on a day marked by incessant rainfall. Wind whipped the trees in the Van Doren estate's expansive garden, scattering leaves across the marble driveway. The storm had intensified overnight, and the weather mirrored Catherine's inner turmoil. She'd never been one to demand grand gestures or expensive gifts. A simple, heartfelt acknowledgement would have sufficed. In years past, Alexander would lavish her with roses, jewelry, or romantic dinners in five-star restaurants. They would dance, laugh, and talk about their shared dreams. Yet this year, as the sun struggled to break through the storm clouds, there was no sign of Alexander. Not even a text message. Catherine rose early, heart fluttering with a faint optimism. Perhaps he planned a surprise? She had to allow him that benefit of the doubt. She showered, dressed in a loose, comfortable sweater that stretched over her pregnant belly, and tiptoed downstairs. The house was silent, echoing her hopes back to her in empty hushes. By mid-morning, her phone remained quiet. No calls, no texts, just the relentless pounding of the rain on the windows. She sipped tea alone in the spacious living room, trying not to let her tears overflow. The day dragged on, each hour a cruel reminder that the man she loved was too lost in his own world to remember something as simple as her birthday. And where was Alexander? He was in an upscale penthouse suite downtown, far from the prying eyes of Westbridge Hills. A last-minute business conference call had turned into a celebratory lunch with potential investors. And that lunch turned into an impromptu dinner. Throughout it all, he was accompanied by Anastasia. She'd demanded a face-to-face meeting to discuss their future, and Alexander, hoping to placate her, invited her to the city under the guise of business. In the plush intimacy of that penthouse, they shared whispered confidences and sipped champagne. Anastasia prodded him about the timeline for his divorce, pressing harder than she ever had before. Her green eyes burned with resolve. "You keep saying you'll leave Catherine. You said you'd do it before the baby arrived, so we could start our life. But time's running out, Alexander." He swallowed hard, scanning the room as if searching for an exit. "Things are complicated, Anna." "You know that," he said, employing the gentle tone he used whenever he tried to calm her. "Once this business deal closes, I'll make the final move, I promise." Thunder rumbled in the distance, lightning splitting the sky. A flicker of guilt surfaced in Alexander's eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, but he ignored it. He was too ensnared by Anastasia's allure, too intoxicated by the escape she provided. He never once glanced at the date or realized its importance. Even as night fell, Catherine's phone remained silent of any birthday wishes from her husband. Alone in a darkened living room, the storm raging outside her windows, she made a promise to herself after the baby was born. She would confront Alexander directly. No more doubts or uncertainties. She wanted the truth, whether it shattered her heart or not. For Alexander, this single oversight for getting his pregnant wife's birthday would prove to be the first domino in a cascade of devastating consequences. The morning after Catherine's forgotten birthday, the storm had finally abated, but the atmosphere within the Van Doren mansion remained suffused with tension. Catherine woke up feeling numb. She hadn't slept well. Every time she closed her eyes, memories of happier birthdays flooded her consciousness. She remembered how Alexander once surprised her with a hot air balloon ride, how he serenaded her on a whim. Now, that seemed like another lifetime. She mustered the courage to confront him, but found the master bedroom empty. In his usual spot on the nightstand, Alexander's phone was missing. So was he. Instead, she found a terse note, had an early meeting. Don't wait up. The words stung like a slap to the face. Her birthday gone, unacknowledged. She wondered if he even remembered now. By noon, Catherine decided she could no longer ignore her suspicions. She needed proof, solid evidence of Alexander's infidelity. Gathering her resolve, she went to his home office. It was a spacious room, lined with dark wooden shelves and encyclopedias of business strategies, with a large mahogany desk dominating the center. In that desk was a locked drawer she'd seen him open a few times, always discreetly. Her heart pounded as she rifled through his keys until she found the small one that fit. The drawer clicked open to reveal a stack of documents. Nestled among them was a small black journal with handwritten notes and receipts tucked into the pages. She flipped through quickly, eyes widening at what she saw, travel itineraries to luxury hotels. She had never stayed in with him. Designer shopping receipts for items far too intimate to be for business associates. And pictures. Selfies he'd taken with Anastasia in fancy restaurants, at art exhibits, and once on a yacht, each one capturing their secret world. Catherine's breath caught in her throat as she studied the woman in the photos. Anastasia was stunning everything. Catherine had once been, perhaps. But it wasn't just jealousy that roiled in Catherine's gut. It was betrayal, heartbreak, and a fierce determination. She now had confirmation of her husband's double life. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. Footsteps in the hallway jolted her, and she hastily shoved everything back into the drawer, locking it. She could barely compose herself when Alexander walked in, a troubled expression on his face. "Kath, what are you doing in here?" he asked, noticing her tremor. She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and turned to face him. For a moment, neither spoke. Catherine was torn between accusing him outright and preserving the little dignity she had left. In the end, she said, "We need to talk," her voice steadied by an undercurrent of rage and heartbreak. Alexander looked uneasy. "Yes, we do, but maybe later. I have important calls." "Important calls?" she echoed, her voice edged with anger. "What about my birthday, Alexander? Or does that not matter anymore?" He seemed genuinely startled, a flash of realization crossing his face. "Catherine, I'm sorry. It slipped my mind with all the chaos at work. She held up a hand, cutting him off. Just don't. "We'll talk tonight," she said, her voice quivering with hurt, but also steeled by knowledge. With that, she brushed past him, leaving Alexander to grapple with the first stirrings of real guilt. What neither of them could predict was just how explosive that evening's conversation would be and how its repercussions would extend far beyond the walls of their mansion. Night descended on Westbridge Hills with a certain heaviness, as if the air itself braced for an impending confrontation. Catherine spent the day locked in a mental tug-of-war. Her heart wept for the marriage she once had, yet her mind screamed for answers, resolution, no matter how painful it might be. By the time Alexander returned home, she was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch like a sentinel. The room was awash in the dim glow of a single lamp, casting dramatic shadows on the walls. Catherine's expression was resolute, her posture poised. "We talk now," she said firmly the moment he stepped inside. Alexander set down his briefcase and loosened his tie, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else. But there was no escaping. Not this time. Catherine wasted no time. She retrieved the stack of incriminating documents and photographs from the desk drawer, laying them out on the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. "Do you want to explain these?" she asked, her voice heartbreakingly calm. Alexander froze, color draining from his face. He glanced at the images of him and Anastasia, the receipts, the notes scrawled in the little black journal. Lies dangled on the tip of his tongue, but he could no longer pretend. Catherine, who is she? Catherine's voice cracked, just enough to reveal her underlying pain. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. Her name is Anastasia Pierce. We met some months ago. It was never supposed to go this far. Catherine's eyes glistened with tears she fought to hold back. But it did. And you chose her over your own wife, your pregnant wife. Why, Alexander? She waited, but no meaningful excuse came. Have you even considered the stress you're putting on me, on our child? Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose, shame mingling with frustration. Catherine, I'm sorry. My life. It felt like it was missing something. I couldn't control it. Everything just spiraled. Missing something, Catherine repeated, her voice choked with emotion. We built a life together, and I'm carrying your child. And you say you're missing something? He had no answer that would satisfy her. The room reverberated with silence until Catherine finally spoke again. You need to decide, Alexander. I'm not going to share you with anyone. If you want this marriage, if you want to be a father, you have to cut her out of your life. Completely. Alexander stared at the floor, weighed down by 1,000 unspoken fears. He thought of Anastasia's piercing green eyes, her effervescent laughter, the sense of forbidden freedom she awakened in him. But he also thought of Catherine's steady heart, her unwavering love, and the unborn child he had a duty to protect. The decision was monstrous, yet also straightforward. Family or mistress? I need time, he whispered finally, afraid to look Catherine in the eye. You have until tomorrow, she said, not unkindly. Otherwise, I'll do what I have to do for myself and for this baby. Alexander nodded, the gravity of her words crashing over him. He turned away, unable to face the devastation etched on her features. As he climbed the grand staircase to their bedroom, he felt as though each step carried him closer to a decision that would reshape his life forever. But fate, as it often does, had other, more dramatic plans in store. Anastasia Pierce had reached her breaking point. The night before, she and Alexander had exchanged tense text messages. His vague reassurances did little to calm her growing apprehension. A new fear clutched at her heart. What if Alexander never truly intended to leave Catherine? What if all his promises were just a mirage, dangling before her to keep her interested while he juggled a double life? In a moment of reckless determination, Anastasia decided to force Alexander's hand. She dressed in a tailored navy trench coat, stepping out into the drizzly morning air, and hailed a taxi to Westbridge Hills. The journey felt eternal. Nervous energy sparked in her chest as the suburban scenery glided by a realm of manicured lawns and million-dollar estates. So quiet, it was almost unnerving. She clutched her phone, ignoring a series of missed calls from Alexander. Let him worry, she thought grimly. Arriving at the Van Doren mansion, she stepped out onto the gravel driveway, her heels crunching ominously. The mansion loomed before her, a testament to the wealth and power that Alexander commanded. If he truly wanted a life with her, he had to be honest. She squared her shoulders and marched to the front door, ringing the bell with a steely determination. It was Catherine who opened it. The two women locked eyes for a moment. Catherine, heavily pregnant, was taken aback by the visitor's striking beauty and unwavering stare. Recognition dawned on her face. She'd seen that face in the photos. Instantly, her heart pounded like a war drum. Anastasia Pierce, the woman, introduced herself, barely managing the politeness to offer a tight, thin-lipped smile. I'm here to see Alexander. Catherine inhaled a trembling breath. So this was the woman who had disrupted her life. Anger roiled beneath her outward composure. Alexander isn't home, Catherine said icily, stepping aside to block any attempt of entry. Then I'll wait, Anastasia replied, her voice resolute. She took a daring step forward, as if challenging Catherine to stop her. The tension in the foyer was suffocating. Catherine's fists clenched involuntarily. "You have no right to be here," she hissed. "You've already caused enough harm." Anastasia met her gaze, anger flaring in her emerald eyes. "Listen, Catherine," she said, her tone unyielding. "I know this is painful, but I'm not the only one responsible. Alexander led me on. He promised me." Catherine cut her off, voice quavering with a mix of rage and despair. "Promised you what? A life together? A future? And what about my future? Our child's future?" In that moment, both women realized how intricately their fates had become entwined by one man's lies. The confrontation escalated into a chaotic exchange of accusations and heartbreak, culminating in a stark ultimatum from Anastasia: "If Alexander doesn't choose me, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man he really is." Before Catherine could respond, headlights swept over the driveway as Alexander's car pulled in. He stepped out, shock painted all over his face at the sight of the two women. His mistress and his wife both pregnant, with questions, accusations, demands stood mere feet apart, and he was the linchpin in this entire, spiraling disaster. Little did Alexander realize the damage was already done, and that destiny had yet another cruel twist waiting around the corner. The wind picked up again as storm clouds gathered above Westbridge Hills, painting the sky a deep grey. Alexander hurried to the front steps, his heart pounding from the moment he recognized Anastasia's sleek figure standing face to face with Catherine. "Alexander," Anastasia said stiffly, hands balled at her sides. Her eyes flicked to Catherine's pregnant belly, then back to him. "We need to talk." "Inside," Catherine added, her voice cold. "Now." Alexander could scarcely breathe under the weight of their combined fury. He led them to the living room, a space usually reserved for elegant gatherings and polite conversation. Today, it felt like the stage for a tragic showdown. The air crackled with tension as they stood in a triangle, Catherine by the grand piano, Anastasia near the fireplace, and Alexander between them, his expression etched with desperation. He turned to Anastasia first. "What are you doing here? This is my home. You can't just—" She cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't you dare scold me. You've been avoiding me, dodging my questions. You promised me a life, a future. I deserve an explanation." Catherine's gaze was laser-focused on Alexander. "So it's true. She came to stake her claim in our home, Alexander." Her voice trembled with unmasked hurt. "Did you even think about what this would do to me? To your child?" Alexander's head swiveled from one to the other, panic shining in his eyes. "Catherine, Anastasia, this got out of control. I never wanted to hurt either of you. Yet here we are." Anastasia fired back. "Stop pretending you're some helpless bystander. You orchestrated this. You promised me a fresh start, and now you're looking at me like I'm a stranger." Silence smothered the room. Catherine found her breath uneven, anxiety pressing down on her like a vise. She spoke slowly, trying to maintain composure. "You told me last night you needed time. Well, time's up. Choose now, Alexander. Tell her to leave and cut ties for good, or we're done." The ultimatum hung in the air, a loaded gun aimed at the fragile life he'd built. Alexander looked at Anastasia, whose jaw was set in defiance. Then he turned to Catherine, her eyes dark with betrayal, one hand protectively resting on her belly. A swirl of images raced through his mind. The vow he'd taken with Catherine, the child that was mere weeks away from coming into the world, the nights of stolen passion with Anastasia, the promises he'd made in whispered hushes. His throat felt dry as desert sand. He paused, swallowed. "I choose Catherine. This is my family. I can't abandon my wife and our baby." Anastasia recoiled as though slapped. "You're making a mistake," she said, voice shaking. "You told me you were unhappy, that you wanted out." Alexander closed his eyes. Maybe I said things in the heat of the moment, but it's over. "We're done, Anastasia." Tears welled in Anastasia's eyes. Part of her had expected this answer, but hearing it aloud shattered her illusions. She shot Catherine a look that was equal parts fury and sorrow. "You think you've won?" she said in a voice strangled by heartbreak. "He'll do it again. Men like Alexander never change." With that, she spun on her heel and headed for the door, leaving Alexander and Catherine in the hush of aftermath. But even as the door slammed shut, Catherine could not find relief. Instead, a deep, unsettling dread settled in her chest. Something in Anastasia's parting words, in her aura of steely resolve, warned that this was far from over. In the days that followed, Alexander tried to make amends, but Catherine's trust had been severely eroded. She went through the motions, allowing him to accompany her to doctor appointments, letting him place a comforting hand on her shoulder, but he could sense the emotional chasm that now divided them. The staff at the mansion tried to maintain a veneer of normalcy, but whispers circulated. Servants exchanged nervous glances. The air felt fraught with unspoken truths and dangerous secrets. For Alexander, guilt was a relentless spectre. He took extended leaves from his work, passing off responsibilities to his junior partners so he could focus on repairing his marriage. But whenever Catherine caught him texting on his phone, her face would darken, consumed by the bitter memory of his betrayal. Sensing her suspicion, Alexander tried to distance himself from anything that might link him back to Anastasia. He blocked her number, deleted their photos, and tried to bury every trace of her existence. But forgetting is often easier said than done. Meanwhile, Anastasia seethed in her small condo across town, nursing the wounds of rejection. She ruminated over every promise Alexander had made, every glance, every caress. Had it all been a lie? Or had Catherine's pregnancy forced him into a corner he couldn't escape? Yet she refused to accept that her relationship with Alexander was truly finished. She told herself that men like him rarely stayed in the straight and narrow for long. All she needed was a moment, a single slip-up, to wedge herself back into his life, or at least to exact some measure of revenge for the heartbreak. On a particularly sleepless night, she scrolled through her phone, pausing at a saved voicemail from Alexander, left weeks ago. His voice was low, seductive, sweet as honey. "You're my shining star, Anna. I can't wait to build the life we've been dreaming about." She replayed it several times, tears of rage blurring her vision. Finally, with trembling fingers, she forwarded the voicemail to Catherine's email address, found on the Van Doren Foundation's official website. No note, no explanation, just raw evidence of Alexander's duplicity. Let Catherine decide how to interpret it. When Catherine woke the next morning, she found the voicemail in her inbox. Listening to it felt like ripping open barely healed wounds. She stared at her phone in disbelief, the numbness giving way to anger. Alexander was still asleep beside her, oblivious to her discovery. She wanted to wake him, to scream, to demand why he had ever said those words. But she fought the urge. Instead, she slipped out of bed and walked to the nursery. The pastel walls, the mobile gently spinning over the crib, all reminded her of what was at stake, her baby's future. Sighing, she sank into the rocking chair, the phone screen casting a pale glow in the dim morning light. She was tired physically, emotionally, spiritually, tired of feeling powerless. A plan began to form in her mind. If Alexander had indeed ended things, then Anastasia's meddling might be an act of desperation. But if he was lying, Catherine intended to find out. No more half measures. She was determined to lay this entire mess bare, consequences be damned. A new storm system rolled over the coast, lightning slicing the sky in eerie flashes. The thunder echoed like a premonition of chaos yet to come. Catherine decided she couldn't wait any longer. She approached Alexander in his study, face solemn, heart pounding. "We need to talk," she said, her voice devoid of the softness he once loved. The man across from her looked fatigued, but she showed little sympathy. He nodded, shutting his laptop. "What is it, Kath?" She held up her phone, her gaze cold. "Anastasia forwarded me a voicemail. From you." Alexander's face tightened, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Catherine, that's old. Before I decided to fix things with you, I swear. Then why is she sending it now?" Catherine demanded, forcing her rising anger down. "Are you still in contact?" "No," he said firmly. "I told you. I ended it. She won't leave me alone. She's upset." Catherine wanted to believe him, but trust had become a fragile concept in her life. "I'm giving you one chance to prove you're telling the truth," she said. "Meet with Anastasia face to face. Make it clear, once and for all, that she has no place in our lives. That might be the only way she'll stop harassing us." Alexander swallowed hard. He imagined Anastasia's pleading eyes, the swirl of unspoken sorrow between them. But Catherine was right. There was no other way to end this cleanly. "Fine," he said, his voice tinged with resignation. "I'll do it. On one condition, you come with me. Let there be no confusion." Catherine paused. The idea of confronting her husband's mistress again filled her with dread, but perhaps this was the closure they needed. "All right," she agreed quietly. "We'll do it together." That evening, a meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a private lounge in a boutique hotel. Downtown, quiet enough for discreet conversation. Rain hammered against the windows as the trio converged. Anastasia arrived first, nursing a glass of wine at a corner table. Catherine and Alexander appeared moments later, side by side but maintaining a formal distance. Alexander wasted no time. "Anna," he said tightly, "this needs to end. We're done. I'm choosing my family." Anastasia's eyes flickered with wounded pride. She made a visible effort to remain composed, though her voice quivered. "Are you sure, Alex? After everything we shared?" Catherine stiffened, her arms crossed. "He's sure," she cut in, refusing to be intimidated. "We both are." The lounge was nearly empty, their voices resonating with a tense intimacy. Anastasia inhaled sharply, as if grappling with her next words. "Fine," she said, forcing a shrug. "But I didn't come here to beg. I came to warn you. If you think I'm going to disappear quietly, you're mistaken." Lightning illuminated the windows, revealing streaks of rain that smeared the night sky. Catherine's heart hammered. "What are you talking about?" Anastasia leaned forward, her green eyes narrowing. "Alexander promised me more than just sweet words. He made business deals in my name, gave me insider information. It's all documented, Catherine. I could ruin him or your precious Van Doren name if I wanted to." Alexander paled. "Anna, you wouldn't," he whispered, realizing the depth of the betrayal he'd enabled. A bitter smile tugged at Anastasia's lips. "Don't corner a wounded animal, darling. You never know how vicious it might become." The flash of lightning outside was blinding, followed by a crack of thunder so loud it rattled the chandelier overhead. In that moment, all pretense of civility shattered, and Catherine realized that the storms raging within their lives were far from over. The next morning brought a jarring sense of urgency. Catherine woke early, anxiety dancing across her heart. She paced the corridors of the Van Doren mansion, imagining the headlines if Anastasia unleashed her secrets. Alexander's shady dealings might become a public spectacle, and their child would be born into a maelstrom of scandal. She recalled every charity event, every press conference, every philanthropic project that bore the Van Doren name. Reputations could be destroyed in a single headline, but her concerns went beyond image. She feared for Alexander's mental state. Though she resented him for his betrayal, she also recognized that his world had been built on high stakes and risk-taking. If everything came crashing down, would he survive the fall? Meanwhile, Alexander was consumed with damage control. He made frantic calls to his attorneys, his business associates, even calling in favors from local politicians. All the while, he refused to look Catherine in the eye, as if the shame of his affair and the fear of public ruin were more than he could bear. Just when Catherine thought she'd seen the worst, a stern knock sounded at the mansion's front door. A courier arrived with a sealed envelope addressed to Alexander. Inside, they found copies of files implicating him in insider trading and shady property acquisitions documents that bore Anastasia's name in key places. A handwritten note in flamboyant cursive was included. "Decide how this ends, AP." Alexander sank into a leather armchair, burying his face in his hands. "She's not bluffing," he whispered, voice trembling. "I gave her access to some deals. She knows everything." Catherine's mind whirled. She felt a rush of anger, betrayal, and dread. "Why, Alex? Why risk everything we've built?" He looked up at her, hollow-eyed. "Because I thought I was invincible, unstoppable. I got caught up in the thrill of it all. Now it's over." Catherine inhaled sharply, feeling a wave of dizziness. She pressed a hand to her belly, steadying herself. The baby was due any day now, and she realized she needed to protect herself and their child. "We can't let her blackmail us," she said resolutely. "We have to go to the authorities or fight this head-on, or..." The conversation was interrupted by her sudden gasp. A sharp pain rippled through her abdomen, and she doubled over. Alexander rushed to her side, eyes flaring in alarm. "What's wrong? My water broke," Catherine managed between labored breaths. "It's time." Panic surged through Alexander. Everything else, Anastasia, the documents, the scandal, became secondary. He scooped Catherine into his arms, shouting for the driver to bring the car around. Within minutes, they were racing to the hospital, the tension of the mansion left behind, replaced by a new fear that Catherine and the baby might face complications. Yet even as they sped through the rain-slicked streets, one thought pulsed in Catherine's mind. Anastasia's threat still loomed, and nothing, not even the miracle of birth, could fully eclipse the darkness that had infiltrated their lives. She clung to Alexander's hand, uncertain whether this child's birth would bring them together or tear them apart once and for all. The drive to Westbridge Hills Medical Center felt like a fever dream for Catherine. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of pain through her abdomen, and the contractions were coming fast, each wave sharper than the last. Alexander gripped the steering wheel with knuckles turned white, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Their previous worries, Anastasia's blackmail, the precarious business deals, receded in the urgency of impending parenthood. Upon arrival, nurses quickly wheeled Catherine into a private labor suite, and Alexander followed close behind. Alarms beeped softly in the background, the fluorescent lights lending the corridor a harsh brightness that only amplified Catherine's vulnerability. A flurry of medical staff attended her, checking vitals, hooking her up to monitors that tracked the baby's heartbeat. The rhythm was strong, steady, a reassuring sign that even amid this chaos, new life persisted. Alexander hovered at the bedside, stroking Catherine's hair as she breathed through the contractions. Tears shimmered in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quietly that she almost didn't hear. "I'm sorry for everything." Catherine looked into his face, searching for sincerity. Despite the pain, she managed a nod, acknowledging at least the sincerity of the moment, if not full forgiveness just yet. "Let's get through this first," she murmured, her voice tight with discomfort. And so began the longest hours of their lives. Each contraction felt like a crescendo, Catherine's breathing ragged as she tried to focus on the coaching from the obstetrician. Alexander offered her ice chips, whispered encouragement, and rubbed her back. In those moments, the memory of Anastasia and the documents receded, replaced by an all-consuming devotion to bringing their child into the world safely. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, The doctor announced it was time for Catherine to push. She summoned every ounce of strength in her body, the pressure building to an almost unbearable peak. Lightning flashed outside the hospital windows, thunder rolling in a dramatic underscore to the miracle and madness of the evening. Alexander held her hand, pressing his forehead against hers, tears running down both their cheeks. One final push, and the room filled with the piercing cry of a newborn. Catherine collapsed back against the pillows, gasping. The world slowed as a nurse carefully wrapped the tiny, squirming infant in a soft blanket, then placed the baby in Catherine's arms. "It's a girl," the nurse announced, smiling warmly. The baby's cries softened as she felt her mother's warmth and her father's trembling hand gently stroking her cheek. In that moment, Catherine and Alexander locked eyes. A silent understanding passed between them, a recognition that, despite the betrayals and lies, they had created something precious. For the first time in months, hope flickered in Catherine's chest, even if it was fragile and overshadowed by the storms awaiting them outside the hospital walls. For a brief time, the world paused. Friends and family, those who hadn't already distanced themselves, sent congratulations. Nurses praised the baby's health. The newborn slept peacefully in a bassinet beside Catherine's bed, and Alexander found himself watching in awe, as if seeing true beauty for the first time. But reality waited, patient and unrelenting. On the second day of Catherine's hospital stay, Alexander stepped out to take a call from his lawyer. It was confirmed. Anastasia had indeed sent copies of incriminating documents to various media outlets, all set to publish unless Alexander met her demands. She wanted a substantial sum of money, enough to set her up for life, and a public apology that admitted no wrongdoing on her part but tarnished his own credibility. Alexander felt the walls closing in. He could pay her off, but it wouldn't end the speculation or the rumors. Worse, it would deplete his liquidity at a critical moment, possibly sabotaging the Charleston development deal. On the other hand, if he refused, he risked being charged with insider trading, an offense that could ruin him financially and legally. His mind reeled as he stared at the sterile hospital corridor, where the faint smell of antiseptic mingled with his own cold sweat. Returning to Catherine's side, he found her resting, the baby swaddled in her arms. He hesitated, torn between burdening her and wanting to share the weight. Guilt gnawed at him. Eventually, he told her everything. Catherine's first reaction was shock, followed swiftly by anger. But as she looked down at her sleeping daughter, a fierce, protective instinct overshadowed all else. "We can't let her destroy this family," she said firmly. "You need to fight back, but do it the right way." Alexander nodded, tears threatening to betray his composure. "I don't know how," he admitted. "The law is on her side if she has proof." Catherine set her jaw. "Then we need to find proof that she manipulated you too. Something that shows she isn't an innocent victim. Doesn't she have any skeletons in her closet?" A spark of possibility flickered in Alexander's eyes. Anastasia had once boasted about bending rules in her art curation business, forging documents to smuggle rare artifacts. Could that be leveraged? He wasn't sure. Still, the notion of exposing Anastasia's wrongdoing carried its own risks and moral dilemmas. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Alexander reached out to an old acquaintance, Daniel Remington, a tech-savvy investor who owed him a favor from their early days in real estate. Daniel was known for keeping hush-hush about grey area tasks, often skirting legal lines to get what he needed. Alexander felt a wave of distaste for resorting to such alliances, but the alternative was ruin. They met in a dimly lit parking garage beneath a high-rise downtown, reminiscent of a scene from a spy thriller. Rain dripped from overhead pipes, creating puddles that reflected the fluorescent glow of flickering lights. "You've really stepped in it this time, haven't you, Van Doren?" Daniel said, leaning against a concrete pillar, arms folded. Alexander exhaled heavily. I need to protect my family, Dan. I messed up. Help me fix it. With a wry smile, Daniel nodded. I'll do what I can. Get me her phone number, any email addresses, social media handles, anything. I'll see if there's something we can use to negotiate. Alexander handed over a small piece of paper with Anastasia's details. Whatever you find, keep it quiet. I don't want to push her into a corner so badly that she lashes out. She's capable of anything right now. Daniel's eyes gleamed, understood. Back at the mansion, Catherine sat in the nursery, feeding their daughter, whom they had named Elizabeth Grace Van Doren. The baby was a marvel, a tiny bundle of innocence and potential. Every coo and yawn tugged at Catherine's heart, reminding her of the life she wanted to protect, a life free from the shadow of scandal and betrayal. Alexander paced the hallway, phone in hand, awaiting Daniel's call. Eventually, it came. Daniel's voice crackled through the line. I've found something. Anastasia had some questionable dealings with a private collector overseas. There might be grounds for accusing her of fraud or smuggling. The details are fuzzy, but the mere threat of exposing this might make her back off. Relief coursed through Alexander, though it was tainted by the bitterness of how low he was willing to sink. All right, draft a statement. Send it to her. Make it clear that if she releases anything about me, I'll release what you found about her. Let's see if she calls our bluff. An uneasy truce settled over the Van Doren household as they waited for Anastasia's response. Days dragged on without any new media reports or blackmail messages. Catherine clung to hope, her focus shifting to Elizabeth's well-being. She began to imagine a future, maybe a smaller house, a calmer life. She'd even considered renting an apartment somewhere far away if the scandal erupted, determined to shield Elizabeth from the fallout. One afternoon, Catherine was in the living room, rocking Elizabeth in her arms while Alexander scrolled nervously through emails. Suddenly his phone buzzed. A message from Anastasia flashed across the screen. You think you've outsmarted me? I'm not giving up that easily. Let's negotiate. Alexander glanced at Catherine. She nodded, silently urging him to handle the situation carefully. Responding promptly, Alexander typed, We both have damaging information. Let's end this without mutual destruction. What do you want? A minute passed, felt like an eternity before Anastasia's next message arrived. A sum of money. Enough to cover damages and lost opportunities. Once I have it, I disappear. No more threats. Bile rose in Alexander's throat. He typed through gritted teeth, where and when. She shot back a location, a chic cafe in the city, and a time, tomorrow afternoon. Alexander's mind churned. Meeting in public reduced the risk of confrontation, but it also meant there'd be watchful eyes. He'd have to be cautious. Catherine insisted on coming along, but Alexander shook his head. We can't risk that. If we push her too hard, she might become vindictive again. Reluctantly, Catherine agreed, but she insisted on a safeguard. Alexander would wear a small recording device, courtesy of Daniel's connections, to capture any incriminating admissions. If Anastasia tried to renege or twist the agreement, they'd have tangible evidence to protect themselves. The next day arrived, overcast and drizzling. Alexander parked a few blocks from the cafe, briefcase in hand. Inside the case was a fraction of the money Anastasia demanded, with a promise of the rest to be wired to an account once she confirmed the destruction of all incriminating documents. Daniel lurked in a nearby car, ready to call the police if things went sideways. Alexander's heart hammered as he stepped inside. Anastasia was seated in a corner booth, wearing large sunglasses despite the grey day. She signaled him over, her smile a precarious blend of regret and defiance. Busy day? She asked, voice dripping with irony. Alexander ignored the small talk and placed the briefcase on the table. Here's your partial payment. You'll get the rest when I have proof you've deleted every file and retracted every statement." Anastasia removed her sunglasses, revealing reddened eyes that hinted at sleepless nights. "You really believe I wanted it to come to this, Alexander? I loved you." A pang of something, guilt, pity, flickered across his face. "We both made mistakes, but you went too far, Anna. Blackmail isn't love." She sighed, tears threatening but never quite falling. "I just wanted the life you promised. Everything else was me lashing out." He slid a small flash drive across the table. "This contains evidence of your dealings abroad. Let this serve as a reminder not to cross me again." Her gaze hardened, and for a moment Alexander wondered if she might cause a scene. Instead, she took the flash drive, exhaling sharply. "Fine, I'll wipe the files, retract my leaks. But if you ever breathe a word about my dealings, I'll have my own backup plan. Do we understand each other?" Alexander nodded. The tension between them was suffocating, heavy with the ghosts of what might have been. With trembling hands, Anastasia unzipped the briefcase, checking the cash. Then she stood up, smoothing her coat. "You win, Alex. But trust me, life doesn't always hand out second chances. Whatever problems you had in your marriage, fix them, or you'll end up right back here." She brushed past him, leaving a faint trace of perfume in her wake. Outside, the drizzle had intensified into a steady rain. Alexander watched her disappear into the grey cityscape, a swirl of emotions too tangled to name. Part of him felt relief, another part sadness, and yet another part an unshakable sense of foreboding. Had he truly shut the door on this chapter, or had he merely postponed a worse disaster? Back in Westbridge Hills, Catherine waited anxiously by the fireplace, Elizabeth asleep in her nursery. When Alexander finally returned, drenched from the rain, she saw the exhaustion etched in every line on his face. Without speaking, he sank onto the sofa beside her. The crackling fire cast flickering shadows on the walls, as if echoing the turbulent shadows that still haunted them. "It's done," he said quietly. "She'll back off." Catherine searched his face for reassurance. "And the evidence? She'll destroy it?" He nodded, though not entirely convincingly. "That's what she agreed to." Reaching out, he took her hand, his voice trembling slightly. "Catherine, I know I've hurt you deeply. I know sorry doesn't fix everything, but I want to try, for Elizabeth, for us. I promise you, I'm finished with lies." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting both the pain of betrayal and the flicker of renewed hope. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady. "Then we'll try. We'll go to therapy, rebuild trust one day at a time. But I won't ever go back to how things were, Alexander. Our daughter deserves better than that." He nodded fervently. "She does. We all do." In the weeks that followed, life took on a new texture, cautious, subdued, but not without glimmers of promise. The public scandal never materialized. The media moved on to the next sensation, and Alexander's lawyers quietly settled any lingering legal concerns behind closed doors. The Charleston deal pulled through, albeit at a tighter margin, and Alexander scaled back his ambitions. Realizing he could no longer juggle illusions and deception with the role of husband and father, Catherine found solace in motherhood, bonding with Elizabeth in the nursery she had lovingly designed. She began writing poetry again, using her pen as a means to process the swirl of emotions. Piece by piece, the Van Doren mansion shifted from a battleground of secrets into a haven where forgiveness might just take root. They often reflected on the darkest hours, the forgotten birthday that set everything in motion, the confrontation with Anastasia at the mansion, the heartbreak that almost tore them apart. Yet through sheer tenacity and a baby's gentle laughter, they found the resolve to keep moving forward. A fragile peace had settled over their lives, but they knew it would take endless care to maintain. For Catherine, each dawn was a chance to decide anew whether to trust Alexander, to trust herself, and to trust in the future of their family. For Alexander, every kiss he placed on Elizabeth's forehead reminded him of the responsibility he bore, the vow he'd nearly broken beyond repair. "Let's make this work," Catherine would say, gazing at their daughter curled in her crib. "Yes," Alexander would echo, voice hushed with humility. "Let's make it work." And in that quiet promise, day by day, they chose each other, determined to cling to the precious gift of life that bound them together even after almost losing it all. And so ends the turbulent tale of Alexander and Catherine Van Doren, a cautionary reminder that even the wealthy cannot buy freedom from the consequences of betrayal. In the wake of heartbreak and near disaster, they stand at a crossroads where forgiveness is an everyday choice, and trust is rebuilt brick by painstaking brick. Anastasia's legacy haunts them still, a reminder of how quickly desire and deceit can unravel a life of apparent perfection. Yet in the fragile laughter of a newborn baby, Alexander and Catherine have found a reason to hope, a testament to the power of second chances. If you've been riveted by this real-life drama, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that peel back the layers of human desire, ambition, and redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe a marriage can truly be saved after such betrayal? Let's keep the conversation going.